Good morning, colleagues. I'll start with greeting colleagues in this seminar room at JIAS, and I'd like to greet all friends and colleagues who managed to join virtually. Welcome to this seminar at JIAS, the Johannesburg Institute of Advanced Study. I would like to start by thanking the director, Dr. Bongani Ngolunga, for granting me this opportunity to address you on this topic that I think is interesting, which is posthumously conceived children in South Africa, a social security perspective. My name is Letlhokwa Mpedi. I'm professor and deputy vice chancellor at the University of Johannesburg, deputy vice chancellor academic at the University of Johannesburg. It's interesting what a small chat, over coffee can do. Dr. Ngolunga, we were having coffee and I shared this interesting topic that I find very fascinating, and said, you have to come and give a seminar at JIAS, and here we are. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Without any waste of time, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can see my presentation, those that are joining in virtually. My presentation this morning is divided into 5 parts. Just a general introduction, and I'll share a little bit on survivors, on the survivors benefits system in South Africa. And as a lawyer, I definitely have to talk about the legislative framework and the eligibility to survivors benefits. And this will be followed by some issues to be considered when one discusses this issue of posthumously conceived children. And then I'll share some concluding remarks. And then at the end, I'm sure there's a chance for some questions and interaction. Whenever I share some thoughts with friends and colleagues on this topic, people start by wondering, posthumously conceived children, how is that possible? And I say this is possible. In South Africa, and I checked it myself, at almost every city, there is a fertility clinic. You can Google, there's a list of those, and it's not just in South Africa, throughout the world. I was visiting the city of Ahmedabad in India, in the state of Gujarat in 2020, just before lockdown. It was early January, February, around the time. And I found it quite interesting to see that almost every corner, there's a big sign, test tube babies. And I thought, well, test tube babies, that sounds terrible. That the reality of the matter is that it is possible for people to conceive using technology. But what about posthumously? This is something that we're going to discuss. And the interesting thing is that people don't talk a lot about this. The other day I was traveling with a good friend of mine on a journey to attend a conference at the Kruger. And we were talking about this topic, and what I find quite interesting is that often when people want to use these reproductive technologies to conceive, their focus is on conception. And after there has been success, a lot of people forget about those things. And a colleague of mine told me something that I said, now that we are talking about this, I remember we had a number of fertilized eggs that are still with the fertility clinic, and we haven't discussed what to do with those. And these are things that are happening during the good times. And I don't wish my friend bad things, but during the good times, those fertilized eggs stay there. And people forget about that because now they're children. And then later on, what happens to them? Should something bad happen? I don't wish the couple anything bad. Can the grandparents go then and say, hold on, we need these eggs, and then we'll get a surrogate and have further grandchildren? What about the rights of those children? And what about the rights of the deceased parent and so on? But there are other strange situations where you find that a person is brain dead, And the doctors say to the parents of the person that is brain dead to say, look, we must now switch off the machine. Do you give us permission? And the mother or the father or the parents of the person who's hooked up to machines, you know, there are instances like that. There's a case overseas where they say, hold on, doctor. Yes, we understand. There's no going back. But before you switch off the machine, we want to harvest a little bit of his sperm cells, and we'll get a surrogate, and then so that we can have grandchildren. But the guy is brain dead, you know. Did he give his permission? Parents, do they have the right to this? What about those children that are born through this? In South Africa, unfortunately, as you'll hear, our legislative framework doesn't cover this adequately. But in the US, there's a lot that is being done on this, although it varies from one state to another. Without any waste of time, I thought I should give that background. I want to start, before I get to my proper introduction, I want to start with a quote. This is a quote from a case of Hecht versus Superior Court, is a California decision. And this was handed out by the California Court of Appeals in the United States. And I quote, this is an excerpt from a letter left by a person that committed suicide. And he reads as follows. He wrote, and I quote, I address this to my children because although I have only two, Everett and Katie, it may be that Deborah, that is the surviving girlfriend, will decide, as I hope she will, to have a child by me after my death. I've been assiduously generating frozen sperm samples for that eventuality. If she does, then this letter is for my posthumous offspring, as well with the thought that I have loved you in my dreams, even though I never got to see you born. If you are receiving this letter, it means that I'm dead, whether by my own hand or that of another makes very little difference, close quote. This sounds like, you know, a line from a rap song, you know, those who listen to rap, Tupac, the legendary Tupac Shakur has got a song. Yes, I'm impressed from Jide. But this happened, you know, and the guy committed suicide, and the girlfriend wanted to follow the wishes of the late boyfriend. But what about the rights of these children? Today, you're going to hear about this issue from a social security point of view, because in terms of social security, you get the so-called survivors benefits. When can this person benefit? Can this person benefit? If not, how should this thing be dealt with? As I said, it's one area where we have a serious problem in this country and many other jurisdictions. Let's start with the proper introduction. Now, as I've already indicated earlier, there are alternatives to traditional methods of conceptions. Today, you know, would-be parents can choose how they want their children to be conceived. It's a choice that is there. And through artificial insemination or fertilization outside the female's body, using a frozen sperm and egg, children can be born. It's as simple as that. And through this, we hear now that there is this possibility to delay the biological clock. You know, people can postpone and delay the biological clock. So children can be conceived and be born posthumously. And sometimes people do it as a precaution. Imagine somebody who's going to a dangerous place, say there's a nuclear accident, and although one is not ready to have children, but say, before I go there, I need to store something at the fertility clinic so that, you know, should something go wrong during my visit, then I have the possibility to have children at a later stage. And if somebody passes on, is that property? Who can use that? Can they use this without the permission of the deceased and so on? But now there's a question that is brought to the fore by this new class of children. What is the status of these children? There is a great deal of uncertainty. If you look at Section 40 of the Children's Act, it does make a little bit of provision for children that are born through artificial insemination, but it doesn't specifically refer to those that are posthumously conceived, because it says if this is done by consent and between a husband and a wife, those children will be deemed to be the children of that couple. But now, remember, in law, death dissolves marriage. So people can remarry and so on. And if after the death of one of the, especially the husband, in some instances, the marriage has been dissolved and there are children that are born posthumously, other survivors can challenge this. Are this really the children of the deceased? Then it's drama after drama, but we'll come to that. So far, what one can really state is that South African law is lagging behind when it comes to the developments in reproductive technology, because this is not regulated properly. And it's a general problem with law. Normally, law, it takes a long time to catch up with, reproductive technologies or even developments in artificial intelligence and all that. And it takes forever for, the legislature to pass relevant legislation. And this imposes serious challenges on the administration of the deceased estate, and especially from a social security point of view, survivors' benefits. Because when, as soon as a person that is covered by these social security schemes passes on, then the estate must be administered, and those survivors' benefits must be distributed, and then life goes on. But if there is this possibility that there may be a child born at a later stage, then it makes things a little bit complicated. Let's look at the survivors' benefit system. And here I'll just focus briefly on the conceptual context. Survivors' benefits are part of the so-called 9 classical risks, ladies and gentlemen. These are those social risks that are found in Convention 102 of 1952 of the, it's the ILO Convention on Social Security Minimum Standards. So these risks are medical care, sickness, maternity, old age, family, invalidity, unemployment, employment injury, and death. Now, you'd find that the available schemes, especially in those that deal with social insurance, even if they may be dealing with unemployment, but they do provide for survivors' benefits should the person that is covered pass on, and then the survivors can claim. So the compensation that is provided is generally for permanent loss of the economic support provided by the breadwinner. And this is very close to my heart. Many people wonder why I like Social Security so much. I choose to specialize in Social Security. My father passed away when I was 6 years old. He worked for a construction company, and he died during the course and scope of his employment. And had it not been for the survivors' benefits that we received, from the compensation fund, I don't think I will be addressing you today as a professor. It was not a lot, but it was a little that really kept us going. And my mom received that allowance every month, and that is what raised us. So for me, Social Security really is an important field. You won't become rich, through Social Security law, but you can develop. You can contribute through research to develop the systems and help people. And my hope is to help people that find themselves in the situation that I found myself in, so that they can grow and become productive citizens. I thought I should just mention this. So this is important. Now, prospective beneficiaries need to be in a specific relationship with the contributor. For example, as a father, your children, by operation of the law, have a right to maintenance from you. So there must be that relationship, either by operation of the law. And there are certain instances like in pensions where you have got the so-called factual dependency, that this person depended on the deceased during the deceased lifetime and so on. That's why often in such cases we talk about the de facto dependency, factual dependency, and the legal dependency. But there must be that relationship. So somebody cannot come from nowhere and say, you know what, I'm a beneficiary and so on. Now, eligibility requirements obviously have to be complied with, and often they require actual dependency on the deceased by survivors' benefits to claim. In such a case, it's difficult to prove actual dependency because the children in this case are born after the death of the parent or one of the parents, but it doesn't mean they should be excluded completely. Let's look quickly at the legislative framework. Obviously, you have to start with the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the country here in South Africa, which provides every person with the right to access to Social Security, including, if they're unable to support themselves and their dependents, appropriate social assistance. For those who may not know, Social Security, you can divide this into two. You get social assistance benefits These are not contributory. You don't have to contribute first before you can benefit. They are financed through taxes, and you need to comply with certain eligibility conditions, including that you must be needy and so on. And social insurance is generally contributory. Somebody has to contribute. It's like your medical aid, you need to contribute to benefit. It's like your pensions, you need to contribute before you can benefit, and so on. So the state, ladies and gentlemen, has a constitutionally imposed duty to take reasonable legislative and other measures to progressively realize this right. That is the right of access to social security. And this is subject to the availability of resources and also the limitation clause, in terms of the Constitution, which this can be limited. There are other fundamental rights that are relevant here. For example, the right to equality. In the case of our topic for this morning, equality, can you discriminate between different survivors because of when they were born, or can you not? The right to human dignity, the right to life, right to privacy, children's right to basic nutrition. Once a child is born, you cannot say, if I could use that and I don't like it very much, what I saw in India, test tube baby, you are a test tube baby, therefore you don't have a right to nutrition. It cannot be like that. Right to shelter, basic healthcare services, social services, and the right of access to information and the right to just administrative action. If someone decides, or a social security institution decides not to grant these children their benefits, they are entitled to reasons why, and so that they can challenge. They're entitled to information and so on. So as I've already indicated, we've got non-contributory social security schemes. I just picked a few. Social assistance is one of them. We've got special pensions, which are tax financed. We've got military pensions, which are tax financed. Then we've got contributory social security scheme. I just picked a few. The compensation fund, for occupational injuries. We've got the unemployment insurance fund, where we contribute every month. We've got the pension fund, where an employee contributes, and all of this, that is those contributory social security schemes, they do provide for survivors' benefits. Once a contributor has passed on, or somebody who's covered, the main person, then the survivors are entitled to some survivors' benefits. Now, the current survivors' benefits regime in South Africa is unsatisfactory, in my opinion, in a number of respects. Firstly, posthumously conceived children are not expressly covered. It's just children. Can we interpret the word children or child to include this category? A lot is not being said because it's not happening often. But I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, as time goes on, more and more people use these services, these questions are going to arise. I mean, young couples, can choose to delay the biological clock. There is no pressure, unless if you come from a family where the grannies would say, hey, we can't wait to have grandchildren. Or when are you having more children? My wife and I, we have one child, and I tell my mother and my mother-in-law that the factory is closed. And they look at me like, I'm crazy. I say, Mom, the factory is closed, and they can't understand it. But with this type of technology, can the factory really be closed? I mean, imagine, after retirement, Dr. Malunga, then we go back to get what has been frozen for 40 years and then get a surrogate. And then the next thing, one, has small children. It's possible. And this is more and more of this is going to happen. And we need to get our law and our laws in order. As I indicated, posthumously conceived children are not expressly covered. Some of the social insurance laws rank beneficiaries. The unemployment insurance scheme is one of them. It starts with the spouse of the deceased contributor, then it comes to the life partner, and then if there's no life partner, then it goes on and on like that. In reality, it's creating problems because some contributors, you may find that they have children from previous relationships, and the assumption is that the surviving spouse will take the survivor's benefits and then also make sure that the children from the previous relationship are covered or benefit. But in reality, it doesn't happen like that. You see, those who watch television, is a show in South Africa called Mama Zala, where people have issues with their mother-in-laws and uncles because benefits are not distributed. It's a reality. And these assumptions don't make sense, Another point that I want to touch on is that posthumously conceived children do not qualify for dependence benefits under COIDA, that is Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act. Some social security laws, namely the Pension Funds Act and Special Pensions Act, require that the deceased must have had a legal duty to maintain, the dependent, or would have been legally liable for maintenance of the dependent had he not died. So this is an important point to keep in mind when we deal with posthumously conceived children. So, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, the system lacks consistency and clarity in respect of the entitlement of posthumously conceived children, and this needs to be looked at, So some observations from this short overview on the legislative framework. There is a need for a legislative review, in my opinion, and to update our survivors benefit system. We need to align that with the advancement in reproductive technologies. We need we need a process, or this process should be guided by the principle that the welfare and interests of posthumously conceived children are, just like those of children conceived through traditional methods, paramount. We cannot discriminate between those different categories of children. Posthumously conceived children are entitled to equal treatment and protection in their social security system, and denying them survivors' benefits may result in a constitutional challenge on the basis of unfair discrimination. And now, there might be those that have resources, but indigent posthumously conceived children can benefit from different children's grant provided by the social assistance program. For example, if they are poor and they meet the requirements, then the guardians can claim the child support grant, for example. And from a public policy point of view, it would not make sense to deny such children contributory benefits only to grant them tax finance benefits. The reality of the matter is that, those that benefit from the tax finance grants or benefits should be those that their guardians or their parents could not provide. But if they've provided, why should they not benefit? Some social security laws do make provision for social security schemes to retain any unclaimed benefits. This is something that I have a big problem with. In South Africa, there are billions of rands that are kept by funds as unclaimed benefits. And then if you have children, whether posthumously conceived or not being able to benefit from this, while these funds are getting, interest every day from those billions, it's unacceptable. It would be morally disgraceful, in my opinion, for social security schemes to deny posthumously conceived children survivors benefits and simply transfer unclaimed monies to their reserve funds. Is something that needs to be kept in mind. So now let's move over to some issues based on this. This is not a straightforward matter, ladies and gentlemen. There are ethical and moral considerations. Extracting sperm or eggs from dying persons for posthumous conception and birth. This is something that, for many, it's not an easy thing, I mean, if you have lost a loved one, extraction like this would be the last thing on your mind. But you get people, who see opportunities in everything, if a person didn't give his express permission to have children after his death, how does one deal with this? We'll talk a little bit about this. There are those who argue, say, this is unethical. You're bringing these children to a world, into this world where they are faced with the so-called inevitable fatherlessness. They are born guaranteed that they don't have a father. But this doesn't make sense. I mean, there are people, this assumes that, being fathered by somebody who's alive makes sure that you will be a decent person or you'll be good. I mean, there are people who have deadbeat dads who never saw them and they start celebrating them when they have become something. So I don't want to get into this controversy, but I don't know, but you get those situations. I told you my dad passed on when I was 6. I don't think I turned out badly, I mean, this concept that it takes a village to raise a child. I remember the village where I grew up, it was not unusual for mothers, if we did something wrong, to call one of the dads that is available to chastise all of us. We even knew that if it's you know, the excess debt, we are going to really, we won't see it with our bums for weeks. And if it was another debt, we knew that, you know, he's got a soft hand, and there was nothing wrong with that, you know. But anyway, so this argument really for me doesn't make sense, you know, this inevitable fatherlessness. In our culture, there's not often, you know how it goes in African culture. Now, reproductive material can be stored for an indefinite period. This is where now you get problems, you know. If you have benefits that must be distributed, and you know that there is a first fertilized egg that has been stored at a fertility clinic somewhere in Joburg. Now, what about those surviving beneficiaries? Do they wait forever until someone decides to use them before the estate can be spread, before the benefit can be shared? So it's a problem. Clearly, there has to be a time limit, you know. But when the child is born, the child can come say, look, I want a share of my dad's estate. You know, how do you deal with that? It can get even complicated where the deceased didn't even give permission for people to extract this, you know. Who gave permission, you know, and how do you deal with it? Or, you know, after somebody has passed on, hey, accusation starts flying. Remember, death dissolves, death dissolves marriage. And people say, yeah, but how do we know that these are the real children of the deceased? You know, I mean, I read somewhere that after Ray Charles passed on his estate, you know, there were people trying to claim, and he threatened to do, you know, paternity tests and all those things. These things can turn nasty. So how does one manage this? So the problem is that the lingering possibility that there might be a posthumously conceived child sometime in future may have a negative effect on the interests of the state. That is the desire to have a speedy distribution and finalization of survivors' benefits. You don't want this thing hanging on people's necks. Secondly, posthumously conceived children, they need to be maintained once they are born. I mean, the children are innocent. Why should they be punished because somebody made a decision? Once they're born, they need to be maintained. What about other survivors? The prompt distribution or disbursement and finalization of the survivors' benefits and more benefits, if there are claimants, then they need to be dealt with speedily. How do we manage this thing? You know, I think we can borrow from other principles in the system. You know, in South African law, and I believe other legal systems, there is the so-called presumption of death. If somebody leaves, maybe I shouldn't use a bad example. I know Dr. Professor, the teen will not be happy with me if I use the example of poachers, but allow me to be, if somebody is known to be a poacher, and then he leaves early in the morning saying, I'm going to poach, and he never returns. And months go by, years go by. At some point, the wife can approach the court for this man to be presumed dead. And then he's presumed, if that order is granted, then his estate can be distributed. But whoever benefits from his estate should guarantee that when this guy returns, or should this guy returns, they'll give back what is rightfully his. This is how it works. So that could be used, in my opinion, in this case. You know, other survivors, if they can't wait, they can say, look, let's share, but should there be a child born after a reasonable time, then we are going to give him or her his share. I think it's one way that this could be done. Another thing is to attach a time limit. I mean, I can imagine a spiteful person sitting there saying, oh, I'm going to teach you a lesson. I've got a number of frozen eggs, maybe let's say it's 10, because the doctors harvest as much as they can. If this doesn't work, then they've got more second chance and third chance. And then there are 10 children coming later on. I mean, it's a possibility, you know. And as I indicated, if there's no consent from the deceased, how does this thing work? It can get even more complicated. These eggs, are they property? In other countries, it's an issue. If somebody, you know, now we've got international relationships, marriages and all that. If these eggs are stored and the couple, you know, they come from different jurisdictions, these eggs are stored in South Africa, and the surviving spouse wants to transport them to, I don't know, to I don't know, to wherever, can those be taken, you know, Or in a will, see, I bequeath my frozen eggs to XYZ to do as the person. So there are all sorts of complications. And culturally, oh, this is another minefield. You know, there are cultural beliefs that the dead must be left alone to rest. I mean, I can imagine, you know, somebody saying we want to harvest before this person gets cold. Oh, the elderly they will collapse. I don't know, Dr. Molunga. I mean, where I come from, such a thing really to be, what are you doing? If somebody is gone, must be left alone. But then I talked about this overseas, and there was a judge, you know, US judge there, and she said something interesting. I said, but look, with organ donations, you know, if somebody registered as an organ donor and gets involved in an accident and they can harvest whatever they can, we do that and people are given a chance, you know, to live, you know. Why should it be an issue here? There are those, you know, who come from a religious point of view. They say, look, death should be final. Who are you to question God? If this guy couldn't have children when he was alive, why do you want to, you know, question God's will, you know? I can see people being really upset about this. But there are those who say, hold on, come on, guys. Let us enjoy the benefits, you know, of technology, you know. With this, you know, this is a gift, you know, technology gives us an opportunity for people to survive, you know, for continuity, the family to grow, you know. They use the word to transcend death, you know, the finality of death. So these are some of the difficult questions that one needs to grapple with when you deal with this. So there are three options, you know, to extending survivors' benefits to posthumously conceived children. There are those who say follow the path of least resistance and do nothing. But is doing nothing an option? I don't think it's an option, you know. As we have indicated, more and more people can afford these things. And the more technology improves, you know, they become even more affordable. And people want their options, you know. I read somewhere that the people don't get married anymore. I don't know how true this is. I wanted to check with on the statistics South Africa. I think, yeah, I heard that you know, people want their freedom. You know, people don't get married, but people want children. And I had a couple, you know, they were not married, friends, good friends of mine. And I won't mention names, you know, they had a terrible situation because my friend wanted to get married and then have children, came from a strong Catholic background. And his girlfriend said, no, I don't want to get married, but I want to have children with you. And I don't know if they managed to sort this thing out, you know, we lost contact, but it was a huge thing, you know. It's like, I can't have children without being married to you. My family will have an issue with that. And the lady said, no, my parents divorced. Everybody I know divorced. Let us avoid this thing, but we can have children, you know. So I see this thing being a thing that needs to be dealt with and cannot be ignored. The other option is, you know, as I said, this is not an option at all. I mean, the legal regulation of survivors' benefits will lag even further behind medical developments because doctors don't wait for lawyers or the legislator to come up with rules. And if they can come up with ways to keep us alive, to keep humanity going, why not? You know, they don't need anyone's permission, except obviously those that participate in this and then they comply with ethical clearances and all those things, then that's it. Now, the question of eligibility of survivors' benefits could be left to the courts of the country. Now, courts, you know, like it's one place where, I don't know, you can never hear a judge say, yeah, I've never had something like this. There's nothing I can do, go home. No, the court must decide, you know. So if issues like this arise, they will have to go to courts and courts will have to pronounce on this. But the danger of this being left to court is that litigation involves financial resources and know-how, which are not always available to most of the socially excluded and vulnerable. Obviously, somebody will say, yeah, but how can you afford this fertility cost while you cannot afford a lawyer? But, you know, the issue here is that this does not affect only those that can afford those. Huh? It could be a sibling who has money and other siblings who don't have money and then who are supposed to get those survivors' benefits, or even a mother. You know, my mother went to school up to standard 1. She wouldn't understand these things. She wouldn't even know where to go, you know, to deal with this thing. So if you leave these things to court, then to courts, then it might exclude those that can't afford lawyers. And the other problem is that court decisions have an unfortunate consequence of shaping social policy in a piecemeal fashion. They address the questions that are before them. They would not go like us academic. You try to cover everything related, but courts focus on the issue on the table. Generally, they would do that. Another important point to note here when it comes to courts is that, litigation, a court case can go on forever. Civil case can go on, and then when you think it's finalized, then people can appeal, and then it goes to Bloemfontein, to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and then it goes to Braamfontein. The same thing we see with criminal cases, going on forever and ever and ever. It happens in civil cases. If this thing goes for 10 years, when the matter is finally resolved, imagine if I was in that case and there's a case and everything is frozen. Wait, this must go to court and goes for 10 years. What is it that, will the people or whoever involved in expect the survivors to eat for 10 years? When it comes back, you are old and all that type of thing. If hunger didn't catch you, then Parliament could plug the gaps in survivors' benefit system by amending the pertinent laws, making provision for such benefits. That is one way. The legislative enactment approach seems more attractive in the sense that it is invariably an inclusive and an extended process involving debates by the legislators and often benefits from comments by interested members of the society. There's a bill, it goes out there, everybody can really comment and everything like that. Imagine if there's a bill on this thing, I think it will get a lot of people interested in commenting. And courts will always play an important role in interpreting and applying the relevant legislative provisions pertaining to survivors' benefits. So it's not like courts will be left out. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's go to my concluding remarks. The current patchwork of survivors' benefits statutory framework does not adequately address the right of posthumously conceived children to survivors' benefits, in my opinion. The reproductive technologies will continue to develop, and as long as they are out there, persons will continue to use them. It is, in my view, of utmost importance that the South African social security laws keep pace with medical developments. Policymakers should urgently revisit the regulation of survivors' benefits with the view of extending access to such benefits to posthumously conceived children. Lastly, policymakers should pay particular attention to, among others, the principle that the welfare and interests of posthumously conceived children are paramount, ethical and moral considerations, and more importantly, they must endeavor to balance the conflicting interests of the state, posthumously conceived children, and the living survivors. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. So I'll stop sharing and will be happy to answer any questions that you may have here in the room and also online. So as we are waiting for colleagues to put questions on the chat, I will take a question from Prof. Grace. Over to you, Prof.
This is the first time I've actually heard of this, but I thought it was really fascinating. I actually agree with you that it must come from the legislative view for us to change it.
Yeah.
But seeing how long it can take, I know that for us in technology, the cyber crimes took forever. It felt like forever. And I'm worried that if this is the same thing with this one, which is very contentious. It's going to get to a point where people are going to want to go to the court and say, can you decide this now? And maybe the court's going to say, go away, which is what your worry is. Is there any suggestion that you may have or what you think should happen to try and speed it up so that it's cautiously done and it does take everything into consideration, but still does not, cause prejudice and the people who should benefit?
For me, the best option would be of legislative amendments or legislative intervention to deal specifically with this in a comprehensive manner. Now, we don't see a lot of people running to courts to get issues of posthumously conceived children addressed. but definitely numbers will rise one day. And one would expect, while there's still this breathing period for them, the court, for the legislature to start addressing this issue while there's still time. And we had instances where, unless if the bill is sent back because it's unconstitutional and all that, it didn't take that long, less than a year, to have legislative amendment. I think that would be the best option. But then you need also lobby groups to drive these, especially those that push the interests of children. And in this country, often things must go viral out there on social media that there's a problem for something to happen. This at the moment is a challenge for those that have money. Obviously, there have been cases involving, children that not posthumously conceived children, but children conceived through these technologies. There are a number of such cases, and those involving surrogates. And there's some legislative provision in the Children's Act on this, but it can be expanded. So if we don't have a specific legislation, we can use existing legislation starting with the Children's Act by just having a small amendment in there. I think that would be a start. And then going to relevant social security legislation like the unemployment insurance, and say, if you talk about children, you include posthumously conceived children. I think that will make a huge difference. But other than that, I don't see any other option, that would really solve this problem properly than, to deal with it on a case-by-case basis and so on. Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Jide.
Thank you very much, Prof. Such a very interesting talk, because sounds like this actually has a broader application than this kids we're talking about.
Yeah.
Technology is moving at a very fast
pace. Correct, yeah.
And in AI, we have issues around drones.
Yeah.
Policies around drones.
Yeah.
In Europe and America, they have quite some decent policies.
Yeah.
When I look online, I'm not sure there's a specific policy for drone that is created for South Africa.
Yeah.
So I see this as something that when this application is done, this review of these laws, one could extend it to other aspects of technology that are currently being controversial.
Yeah.
Also, I think this technology is useful for people that lose kids, that lose their children very late in life. And instead of just sobbing for so long, they just it doesn't have to be when the person is dead. So it must be alive to say, if I have frozen eggs, I have one child, the child died in a plane crash. I would like to use it. So, Prof, thank you very much for the very enlightening.
Thank you very much for those comments, Prof. Jide, and also for joining the seminar in person. You're making an important point, because it's not just about medical technology. You're right. Even other technologies, our legislature is slow to react. And now look at EVs, electric vehicles. Not much is being done, whereas other countries, there are incentives and all that. But whether there are incentives or not in this country, EVs are here, and I see disaster with, say, the road exam fund, because once people use, obviously we have unreliable energy supply, electricity supply, but people are now getting off, solar, they're getting off grid and all those things. The road exit fund, if they don't come up with ways and means to make sure that they are sustainable, they won't get the fuel levy. And I suspect that it is slow uptake and coming up with proper regulatory framework to encourage electric vehicles, is maybe realizing that if we keep people off the petrol pumps, there won't be any fuel levy, and so we need really to make sure that, our laws keep up with developments. Obviously, you cannot change laws every day, but there's certain trends, and you need to ensure that there's a proper legislative framework in place. Another important point that crossed my mind, listening to your comments, is that those that use these technologies now need to make their intentions clear, maybe in a will, or even when they sign up to say, look, when I'm gone, I'm gone. Or I leave it up to whoever to make this decision when I'm gone, and so on. At the moment, it's really, it's much.
I think this topic is one of the topics that my mother would have been quite keen on. She would book her phone in Victoria as a media wife.
Yeah.
One of the things that really interests me on here,
Yeah.
hands on things that really target my heartstrings, is the right to human dignity.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm wondering whether there is any research done on these test tube babies whose gestation period exceeded the 40 weeks that is mandated, by nature. I'm wondering whether that has any impact on mental and psychological well-being of these offspring, and that by extension can impact on the right to human dignity.
Yeah.
And if there is no will for the survivors, then that ends up being the burden of the state. And now later on, it begs the question of what determines nationality in this case?
Yeah.
Is nationality where the eggs are stored, or where the gestation happens, or where incubation happens?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll start with the last point. There are rules. Actually, the other day I was talking to my, last week Friday, I was speaking to my postdoctoral research fellow who did his doctorate in private international law, where these kind of things are regulated. You get it, these people, you find people from different countries meeting in another country, getting married in another country, and should they divorce, to see which law is applicable. So there are rules that apply to that, but it's not my area of expertise. Obviously, that will, then the assumption would be that those frozen eggs shall have been transported to another jurisdiction and things like that. But there are private international law rules that will apply. Unfortunately, it's not my area of specialization. But the earlier point you mentioned about the dignity of the child, how they've been treated, I haven't so far managed to get access to anything done on the psychological well-being of these children. But when I was doing my research, I found a report where those opposed to this idea of having posthumously conceived children saying, it's a sick world out there. Posthumously conceived children should other children know how they were conceived. They could tease them, bully them, and so on. And this is not fair for these children. I mean, as I told you, I saw this signs almost at every corner in India, in the city of Ahmedabad, saying test tube babies. Imagine if other people have to find out that I'm a test tube baby. I'm not, but so a test tube baby and all that. This is really not a nice thing. But we cannot say this and I'm not saying this is what we're saying now, I'm just addressing it in general. We cannot say such risks are there and this should not be encouraged because children will be bullied. I mean, people are teased for all sorts of things, I remember as a child, because I have got this gap, people used to tease me, other evil kids that even today I still have that anger when I see them, that I don't want to speak to them. Yeah, I see you also have a gap, Dr. Ngolunga. And they say, hey, stand far away from us. Otherwise, we need a raincoat when you're talking to us. Or otherwise, we need an umbrella. But people will tease you for whatever reason, and I guess it's also part of growing. It makes you stronger. So to run away from this kind of things, it would be unfair. In terms of, the gestation period and all that, remember, many of these kids, at a certain time, the fertilized eggs are transferred into the womb of a woman. I guess, Prof. Gide, there will be times when there are machines that do everything. It's possible, and then connected to computers, playing jazz music or whatever, reading law books. The child comes out there this already, this love for law or botany and so on, and that's going to complicate things. But Prof. Bettine, over to you. Yeah. One of the few things that I remember from my old days are the national service. Yeah. Yes. But from a biological perspective, so in the rights of the grandparents, at what point does a person gets rights, but DNA or genetic material doesn't have rights? I mean, the parents of, let's say, somebody that's dying or brain dead would actually share quite a bit of genetic material. Yeah. And that genetic
doesn't really have a right. So the grandparents doesn't really have a right because they share genetic material. I mean, that becomes a bit. Thing also linked to that. I mean, you have a right if someone is lying their brain to make a decision about organ donating, but you don't have that right. Or it becomes a more problematic right to organ sperm or eggs.
So, excuse me. Thank you very much. You know, I'm glad you mentioned this fiction. It's called I hope it's pronounced correctly. I'm pronouncing correctly. When I did family law, the first year, our professor called it Naskitu's fiction, and I'll explain that. But let's go firstly to the grandparents saying, look, these are the parents of a person lying on a hospital bed who's brain dead. And they say, look, and they have to make that call of switching off the machine. And because of that legal, you know, they've got this legal relationship, you know, by virtue of, you know, being parents and children. And if they make that call, they could, as you have pointed out, they could make a call about donating a liver or something before the mission. And technically, there shouldn't be a restriction in terms of allowing them to harvest whatever they harvest, but it's the end result of that for me, it's problematic because they are going to create life. Firstly, the deceased person might have not even envisaged to have children, but they are making that decision on behalf of the person who's about to die for their own selfish interest, if you could call it that, depending on how you look at it. But you see, if the law says you decide to have it, then you look after it. And in this case, they are rich grandparents. They say, we have the means. We'll get a surrogate. We'll make sure that the child gets this. There should be a process of some sort. But if the child is brought into the life of poverty and want and everything, unnecessary hardship, I think that would be problematic. I don't know if I've answered you.
Yeah. So, the person, the moment that you're conceived, that person has a right.
Yeah.
But the stem cell, the sperm cell and egg cell, there are no rights linked to that.
Yeah.
The legal rights of conception.
Not necessarily. This is where I want to come to the Naskitu's fiction. This fiction, remember, legal personalities at birth, on a child, a live birth, when a child is born and is alive and all that, that is where the rights start, generally. But this fiction came from a case called Pinkin versus Santam Insurance Company, where there was a motor vehicle accident and a pregnant woman, was involved in that accident, and they wanted to sue the insurance company that covered the other car for the injuries or whatever harm the child that suffered, but before it was born, while it was still in its mother's womb. And because at that stage it didn't have the legal personality, then this so-called Naskitu's fiction was introduced as for the purposes of enforcing that unborn child's rights. It will be treated as if it's still it was born and with rights, and then whatever damages that are claimed will be kept in abeyance until the child is born, and then they could be provided to that child. So in this case, it's also a possibility, but you're right. I mean, while it still cells, it's not a human being. It's later when the child is born that child now has rights, entitlement, and so on. And this Naskitu's fiction is one of those fictions or principles that I thought one could borrow when dealing with these legal challenges around this, alongside, for example, presumption of death and so on. I think there are lessons that could be learned from there, because how do you prevent people from, appearing on that television show, I blew it, and then they've got nothing and the child is born, and then they say, yeah, but we ate it, we've got nothing, sue us. And if somebody doesn't have anything, Perhaps some resources, if there is certainty that there may be there's a child or two that will be born, and provision is made, and then those using this fiction, those unborn children being treated as if they are there, and that portion being kept in abeyance until those children are born within a certain time period, like 5 years, Say, look, you use them within 5 years. If you don't, that's it. There has to be cut off time. I think it's only fair. You know? Imagine these children are born 60 years later. All their cousins, everybody is old. Not that it matters, but it could be really, you know, it brings all sorts of complications, you know. Yeah.
This posthumous conception. So what are the implications of it? Because there is a way that says estate should be distributed this way.
Yeah.
And we have not thought about somebody who's conceived after that.
Yeah.
So
it will depend, in my opinion, in terms of the words used. I mean, some people and good lawyers, when they draft these things, they wouldn't specifically, unless if the person, you know, on whose behalf the will is drafted, expressly states that they will say, "These are left to my children." And then if it's established that this is your child, then you cannot. But even if you specifically, you mention people by name, your children say, "This is for X, Y, Z." And then later on, a child is conceived like this, and it's established that this is your child. The court will protect the best interest of the child. That child will not be punished because you didn't provide for the child. Because you will have there will be a legal duty because of your relationship, father. Yeah. There was this, sorry, I'll give you a chance, Dr. Munyai. There was this interesting case in Las Vegas or something like this. I read it in, you know, in one of the newspapers, that there was a wealthy guy staying at a hotel, and he had a good time there with a companion. I don't know. I'm trying to put it nicely, and then left. yeah, and no. It's interesting because apparently there's no way of putting it. He used a condom and left it there. And one of the hotel cleaning ladies used that to inseminate herself. And the child was born. And the judge said, "It's your child, and then you have to maintain it." He didn't even give permission. Dr. Munyai, I see you're nodding. Did you read about it? Did you read about it? Yeah, you see, I'm not making things out. So at the end of the day, the best interests of the child are paramount, you know. And children are innocent. Okay, let me give Dr. Munyai a chance, and then I'll give you a colleague. yeah. And before I hand to Doctor there, colleagues online, please type your questions. We'd be happy to hear from you. I hope you can hear the nice discussion we are having here with the colleagues at the Jayas seminar room. Over to you, colleague.
No, my one
Yeah.
Thank you for
yeah.
My point is, for instance, in my will, I made it very clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I then switch off the machine.
Yeah.
So you don't need any other person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So equally, I should have the right that nothing should be extracted from me. If they do so, the liability goes to those who do.
Yeah.
I don't know, from a legal perspective,
yeah.
Will I be able to adjust my will
yeah.
to ensure that nothing of this nature
yeah.
would take place?
There is a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
How important then is intention?
Yeah.
So thinking about the sperm in a condom.
Yeah.
I mean, you had no intention of having
that child. Yeah. Intention is extremely important, you know, that's why, but if this is legislated and all these things are clearly stipulated, there must be the intention, it must be clear, because, you know, you don't want to have, you know, people interpreting things and thinking, but he might have meant this. So it must be clear intention over a certain period of time and all that. But it's a matter of regulations. You see in the US, a lot of states have got different legislation regulating this thing. And many states make it clear that there must be an intention, you know. And where there is no legislative provision, then it becomes an issue that at the end of the day, now this is left for interpretation. I'm sorry, Justice Kapola, apologies. Online, you indicated that you are having difficulty to hear the questions and comments. Apologies for that. The question was that in an instance where there is no intention, now how does one deal with this situation? And my view is that this is where then clear legislative frameworks, will come handy to make it clear that there should be, an intention on the part of the party whose sperm cells are used for procreation. And there are states in the United States that have legislative provisions that deal with this and are clear on the intention. The fact that there is no proper legislative framework that stipulates this then leaves this open to courts, for interpretation. And there was a question from Dr. Munyai about his will, that how can he make sure that it's watertight and people do not do things, God forbid, should he be brain dead. I mean, my sense is that I sense that you can make it clear that, should I be in this state and nobody should interfere with my mortal remains, and then whoever interferes with that then will be, in breach of what you were suggesting. And the other questions that I'm struggling with, and this is work in progress, colleagues. I don't want to lie to you that I know everything there is to know, because there are so many gaps, which is the issue of the rights of the dead. There are crimes against the dead. I mean, if people start extracting tissue, is that a violation, of their, the rights or the respect, that should be accorded to the deceased persons? It might also be a criminal law issue that needs to be looked at. Actually, this topic could be looked at from a number of perspectives. From an ethical point of view, those that are in ethics, philosophy, from cultural, religious point of view, from science, from AI, from all sorts of angles, and there are more questions, I'm sure, the deeper you dig, and from different angles. But I think it has to be made clear. Yeah. Dr. Bauscher, I hope
actually it's also a following question.
Yeah.
Is there any risk, because everyone has equal right to use the new technology. But is there any risk that the economy, if the man is rich or not, divide if we can use the technology? Which means actually the risk already has rich family can raise more person, but poverty family can raise only very few. So is this new technology will accelerate this kind of problem?
I'm not sure if I get the question. So it's about this technology creating risks. To
divide, because use the new technology.
Yes.
Will cost you some money. There's already some rumor that some millionaire. It's rumor. If we use new technology to raise like 20 million. Divide those kind of highly educated, elegant women to raise baby for them. So that's about my question. This new technology will cause risk that I think is kind of moral risk in the society. Each person will have more beliefs, but poor person will have.
You're right. Okay, now I get you. Definitely, I agree with you that this technology can create more risks, and even now we talk about lack of access, the urban-rural divide and all this. I think this will create even more divisions. Those that don't have resources may not have children or more children, or they cannot deal with some of the challenges that life may throw their way, related to conception and all. And those that have resources will have children. And without even going through the hardships that other people go through. I mean, we see it now. There are famous people that have got twins, additional children using a surrogate, and all those type of things, and those that don't, then they cannot afford to do that. I agree with you. I see here there is a comment, or I think is a question from Mr. Louis Kuhn. Good morning, Prof. Thank you for a very informative presentation. What is likely the biggest contributor to the lack of state action so far? Is it simply a lack of awareness for legislators or other factors such as concerns on resources, resource constraint, religious backlash, etc.? Mr. Kuhn, thanks for the question. I'm just speculating here. I think so far it hasn't been a big issue because it doesn't affect a lot of people, you know, especially the ordinary people. But once this thing become widespread, this is where we're going to have serious debates. I see people from religious backgrounds saying, look, now, you know, death must be final. You know, it will be like abortion. I mean, we come a long way with this issue of abortion. Remember the debates about abortion, and you get people who say, you know, this is against the biblical, you know, commandments, thou shalt not kill, and all those things. So I think it's more about the lack of you know, not necessarily awareness, but that at this stage, it hasn't come to the fore. People may be suffering in silence and nothing is, we need to elevate this thing, you know, and those that deal with children's rights, you know, could take this thing up. But at the same time, if it's just for few people, other people may say, look, the legislature is too busy, must focus on other things and not attend to the issue, the issue at hand. That would be my comment. There is also another comment from Siatokoza. Thank you very much. It says, in the unfortunate case where both original parents have passed at the same time with the worded eggs and seeds, a family that wants the posthumous conception of the couple's child and a willing surrogate whose responsibility might reasonably be to take care of the child, the collective responsibility of the family or the surrogate. You know, thanks for the question. When it comes to surrogacy, often it's about money. And once the child has been born, then it's the end of the relationship. The surrogate can then go their separate ways. But I would say the family member that requested this will have to take responsibility. That would be my take on this, you know, to take this thing forward. Often, people who do these things out of spite, you know, I mean, and for people really to be held accountable, if a person commissions this in inverted commas, I'm talking about child disease commodity, but commissions this kind of a process, that person should be held liable for this thing. And doctors, they make you sign the disclaimer that you are not going to blame me after this. You know, otherwise, except that doctor, apparently that was helping people conceive and it was his children. I don't know, it's also in the news, you know. These things are complicated, but thank you very much, because I hope that you are covered. Yeah, I hope that you're covered. This is really, my aim today was just to highlight the plight of this category of children, but at the same time, the general problem that we are facing in South Africa and many other jurisdictions where the legislative developments always lag behind technological development, and the gap is so bad, you know, that then later on it's just a rush job to try and address something, and which is a problem. This is something that really needs attention, you know, and I can tell you more and more people with those statistics that I had about divorces and people not getting married and people wanting children. I mean, I can imagine somebody with lots of money saying, look, doctors, I want to keep my, but now I should not be controversial now. These things you must be careful because, you know, I don't want to carry my own child, but I'll get a surrogate, harvest, whatever, and then commissions and get you know, donors and all that, and then they have a child. You know, that possibility is coming, and then people go to work. They don't have to go through the difficulties that would be the closest thing to now technology. The next time, then you get a machine carrying a child to term. It's scary, you know, and then you get those, you know, genetic modifications that people say are possible, which are worrying, and yeah, you get clones and all this. So it gets even scarier, you know. But this is really a serious issue, and I just picked social security survivors benefits because it's my area. But the issue of posthumously conceived children, it's a huge issue, even from a different perspectives. Imagine saying somebody going to court and say, I want my property. The way people fight for property left behind by a deceased person, saying, look, this is my property. And siblings fighting, or an ex fighting with the new wife and saying, look, you can't use my husband, I need it, and so you can't have it. The one who was married to him, here's the death certificate, and another one say death dissolves marriage, you've got no right, then the grandparents coming in, and then siblings coming in, and so on. But at the end of the day, imagine the beauty of also people who could not have children, or who could not even have grandchildren, having children, Obviously, for me, the factory is closed, and that is clear that, for my mothers, I'm sure the factory nonsense for them, it's something else. And the worrying thing that you are raising, colleague, about now, if this technologies become something that is for the rich, and the rich can do things and all that, and I can imagine, in societies where there might be all sorts of other consideration, the family bond and all that. Obviously, the person who raises the child, that is where the bond begins, But if it's all about these machines and children, something is bound to be lost, I always refer to my own family, mothers tend to, and my mother always say, look, I don't want anybody to mess with my child. I carried this child for 9 months, If you, mess with my child, you are messing with me, My mother is not a violent type of person, but on that day when she was protecting me, saying that, you can hear that this comes from deep, So I can't see any mother saying, this child was in a machine and I waited 9 months, A test tube and all those things, yeah. Let's see, and there are no more questions or comments, and I don't know if there are questions in the JBS seminar.
No, my mother once picked up on this when she was
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
and she did make mention of the babies that went through the gestation period and incubated.
Yeah.
And did not have any human touch, had no connection to a mother, and they conducted research between those babies born that way and those that had gone through the natural process. And there was distinctive, characteristics that could be picked on the ones that didn't have any connection with maternal parents. And but hence I said, is there any research on test tube babies? Because later on, what we would like to find out is how do they function in society, and the burden, because now that goes back on how these survivors are supported and whether they become functioning members of society.
It is an important point that you are making, because I often say, people, when I had a lot of discussions with people about this, and about this. That's why, when I say, I often say, this is how we came to talk about this with Prof. Mulunga, Dr. Mulunga. The thing here is, sometimes people look. I don't think many think about the child. They think about themselves to say, look, if I can have this, that. And such studies would help. If a child is adopted, let's talk about adoption. Prospective parents, in inverted commas, go through all sorts of hoops, isn't it? I think psychological testing and all those things and all that. But this, if there is no such processes, then it's going to be another issue. I think the issue is people think more about themselves and what they want to achieve than the child, and how to look after that. Such a study would be really interesting. And I found what you're saying quite interesting. And it's not only for the purposes of the discussion here today, but also for, as technologies evolve, people can choose, a sperm donor and using certain characteristics, this must be a professor, and it must be this, must be tall, must be light in complexion, and all those. It's like ordering online, sneakers, size 6, and this, and and it's worrying, eh? Yeah, designer babies. Yeah. Prof.
This conversation is bringing up my mind.
Yeah.
Because I can think almost 100 scenarios
Yeah.
where technology and the law are not on the same page.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what does the form of research in terms of collaboration look like for you in terms of portfolio? Is it something that someone in a master's or a PhD in your department would research into?
Yeah.
Where I can possibly collaborate with colleagues in technology, where we can then explain scenarios that things could go wrong. One that just crossed my mind is drones across borders. So cross-border trade, policies and taxes. Or if I'm just 100 meters away from the border, I can put a drone in the sky to deliver something to someone. Is there a policy for that? Is there a law for that? Is that a crime? Is that not a crime? So would it be possible to set up something like that with you, where we enroll master's PhD candidates to look at specific technologies, 3D printing, just all of them along this, and see what possible scenarios will cause trouble and where the legal entity should be ahead, or what policies.
This is a good idea. I mean, I would be happy to be part of such an initiative. Although I'm a labor lawyer and social security law person, you know, in terms of training, but if we need other people from other legal backgrounds, you know, expertise could be roped in. This is something that I would like us to discuss some more offline to see how best we can. And even if we come up with a, you know, I worked at the Max Planck Institute in Munich, where they had the so-called doctorand colleague, so a group of doctoral students, about 10 students, and they would be registered with the local university, and they would have a topic, important topic, but they would look at it from different angles. And they had students from all over the world. I remember from China, from Spain and all this, and then their seminars, and then the supervisors, in 2 years, they would finish their studies, and then they get an allowance and all that. We did this when I was dean with master students by research, and one of their students, Mr. Kuhn, who's here, is I'm co-supervising him, his doctoral thesis, and those students did very well. 3 of them graduated with distinction. I think 2 of them are pursuing doctoral studies and all that, and we had a common topic, and we looked at labor law and AI and all that, so we could do that. And when I was dean, we had a seminar kind of thing where we had presentations on law and industry 4.0. That book is coming, still being edited. I believe it's going to be published by Juta, which is one of the top law publishers in South Africa. And then we looked at things from different perspectives. I mean, there are colleagues from private international law who looked at autonomous cars, you know, driving across borders and causing an accidents and all this the type of things. So I'm open to something like that we look and see what is possible. I think that will be exciting, you know, to have such people involved. Yeah. Dr. Mia?
Just interest.
Yeah.
Might not apply here. I mean, the good element of this is that we really thinking of going to other planets.
Yeah.
We could transport ourselves using technology in that way. But even here on Earth,
yeah,
there are chances that we will come to an end as an accident, dinosaurs. When a country save the extract as a national security to ensure that should anything happen, human beings will still survive as a national. And lastly, perhaps just watching too many documentaries. What just about nations that are declining? Asia, I mean. I mean, shouldn't states have the right to say, listen, I mean, you guys don't want to concede. Therefore, national emergence to ensure that we expand the population to a certain level. What would be the implication? I know Africa is far from that. We have more people. But you know, perhaps we could expand
with a much more deeper thinking.
Yeah.
Just ourselves.
Yeah.
Sitting on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is also another area where people, you know, one can debate it, you know, to start these debates, that people start thinking about these issues, you know, and ask difficult questions, moral questions and all that. If states start, you know, breeding in inverted commas, you know, yeah, people like chicken at a factory, you know, how would one treat that, you know, or children that come from the program. I know there are movies about this, you know. I mean, there is that, in my opinion, I think it's an amazing film, Agent 47, you know. This guy, this hitman comes with a barcode already at the back. Or you get that movie of The One of Jet Li, a person traveling illegally between continents, you know, and planets, and arguing that, you know, how can I kill myself? So it's, I think as human beings, we want to preserve that family structure, you know, of the uncles and all that type of thing. But it doesn't mean having children in that setup, you know, forget about the state involvement in having, you know, sort of factories producing children, but encouraging people to have children with surrogates in that context. I think it's a way to go, you know, and you get people who have all sorts of things, you know. In our culture, the family name dying is another thing, you know, and is this an option? But these are things that we may need to debate. I think what is necessary today is for us to debate these things, because something that people would frown, you know, who would find morally and unacceptable, with time it becomes like everybody's doing it. Yeah, you know, and yeah, you know, but it's an important question, you know. This something there for you, Dr. Munyao, to look at it from an Asian point of view, you know, especially where the population is, you know, is declining, you know. But how can we set it up? How can they set it up in a way that it favors that family structure? I mean, the thing that you have an uncle, the thing that you've got a cousin, but you get people who don't have those people, don't have any relationship with them. So, Prof. Bettine? No, I'm enjoying this because I'll be honest with you. I'm working on a monograph, but it's moving at a snail's pace, because this is really something that needs a lot of thinking. So this really helps me sharpen up my ideas and think more about things. And then if one can have other people working on this, it's also be exciting, because you cannot deal with this alone. By the way, I must indicate, I talked about this for my inaugural lecture some years ago, but this topic doesn't want to leave my head. And I had a master's student that I signed up and did her master's under my guidance, you know, in social security. She graduated with distinction, this topic, and published an article based on this. But still, it's just scratching the surface, you know. Yeah.
How do we balance? So, against what David was saying, some nations are in China regulating, for example, how many children you may have or not may have. And then against that, nature. So, you know, nature doesn't want us to be more. Nature wants us to be less, as opposed to human rights versus, for example, biological rights, or you know, the rights from nature. So, I mean, all of these, it's actually very interesting.
It is.
I have a question for you. In South Africa, are there any laws at the moment that regulate, for example, sperm storage? You know, you've spoken about it a little bit, but also storage of, lots of people now are harvesting and storing placentas for stem cells later on. So I use my lab to grow them. But in technology, very soon you'll be able to use those stem cells to actually come, because it's undifferentiated cells, and you can essentially direct it to become easy.
Yeah.
So are they, you know, just in terms of storage of those things?
Yeah. I'm speaking under correction, but there is legislation on, I think, covering human tissue, you know, the handling of human tissue and all that. I can't remember what they call it now.
Where, for example, people would want to harvest the center, but the hospitals wouldn't really allow, or they didn't have the facility, or the doctors refused to do it, things like that. So
Yeah.
I think there's a law against you taking your own placenta.
Yeah, there is the National Health Act, and there are regulations regarding the general control of human bodies, tissue, blood products, and gametes. So there is regulation from that point of view. Yeah.
But some hospitals do give placenta.
Yeah, they ask, do you want to take it home?
African culture, they think that there will be witchcraft involved if you leave it there. Secure it.
Also, in some African cultures, the father of the child needs to take the placenta and bury himself in an unknown location. But for anyone beyond the right,
no, some of those would be difficult for me. For the benefit, for the benefit of those colleagues that have joined virtually, the discussion now is about the taking home of a placenta in terms of some African cultures, and Prof. Jide here was indicating that in his culture, right? In some African culture, the father has to take the placenta at night and bury it in an unknown place. That culture would be difficult for me. I don't want to take any placenta home. But some of these things their acceptability is through usage, and if something is a common thing. I was watching a documentary the other day. Dr. Mia, you're not the only one who watches this documentary about migration from Mexico to the US. No longer I blew it. I blew it, and all these are things that you watch because as a family, you sit there and you look very interested, with the family. Otherwise, you must be able to comment. And also cartoons, I watch with my son, and I know all of them because, I have to be able to engage with him. And there are so many lessons from them. But anyway, about that documentary where a journalist asking this young girl, say, where are the people here? And say, no, they crossed to the US, and say, in that house and that house and that house. So it's common that people are no longer, I think through usage and something becomes common and people say, it's normal, everybody's doing it, I thought, I met my wife at university, and then I thought people may think this guy was not interested in his studies, was looking for a wife, whereas that was not the case. And then I mentioned it to my colleagues once, and I discovered almost 90% of all the colleagues met their wives at university. So once you realize, no, I'm not special, you realize that you're not special. I'm sure you also met your wife at, you see, that's why I'm a strong, what do you call this? A strong, what is that right word I'm looking for? I'm one of those who advocates for contact and full-time, students must be on campus. Because that is also where you learn to grow, and engage with people and all that. Because you don't want highly educated people who can socialize, who can speak to the opposite sex and all those type of things. Obviously, marriage should not be the only place. But I think at university is the best place to meet the future spouse. Because once you have missed that opportunity, it becomes difficult. Then it's online. Then it's online. And if you have traditional parents, say, where did you meet? But it's amazing how life has changed from, I know there's still arranged marriages, from where people who know you arranges things and then now getting technology matching you up. I heard that there are apps that you put on the cell phone. I don't have that because I'm not looking. I must be clear that when you move next to somebody who is your match, then it would alert you. I mean, how does that differ with how does it, Prof. Jide, how does it differ with the arranged marriages? No, I'm not downloading anything. Yeah, no. Are there any questions online before we before I hand over to my hosts, I said a mouthful, but what I need to really emphasize is that this is work in progress. Hopefully that monograph will come together and one day be published. But I think this is really an interesting topic, and we need to start questioning certain things about the future than just only talking about the past. Not that it's not important to talk about the past. There are lots of lessons, but in this day and age of technologies coming left, right, and center, we need to be asking ourselves these questions. And today I learned a lot from you colleagues in this seminar room, and also learned from the colleagues who posted their comments and questions online. Apologies that you couldn't hear some of the debates here because we didn't set up the other technology. Hopefully in future we'll have that ability that colleagues can hear everything said. And I thank each and every one of you for joining us virtually. I welcome questions and comments, on this topic, and also exploring ways and means of taking the debates forward. I think there's everything for everyone here, and Prof. Jide will talk offline about that. I think it's a good opportunity to bring, law and technology, AI, and discuss these exciting things. And we can build from there. So from my side, really, I thank each and every one of you. And till we talk again, hopefully soon. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.